Hello everyone, an excellent good afternoon to all of you. I am Priyanshi welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Water and First View Group to Navigating Growth, Southeast Asia CNI Market Update, Recap and Analysis 2023. I take the pleasure to thank all the panel members for extending their immense support to organize this event, and a very special mention to our sponsor, Goodwe, for being our crusaders here. I would request my team to kindly play the commercial video for the Goodwe team. Thank you so much, team, for playing the video. Now, moving ahead, may I introduce Mr. Jeffrey Zing, who is the Senior Solution Engineer from Goodwe Solar Academy, to come on the screen and share his presentation for his company. Welcome on the screen, sir. The screen is all yours. Please let me know if you need any assistance in.
Okay, thank you, Paraishi. And hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey from the Solar Academy of Goodway, and I'm a solution engineer in charge of APAC region. Regarding this symposium, I would like to share our industrial and commercial on-grid products solutions, as well as impressed with some our insights and perspective on the future application of industrial and commercial scenarios. So let's get started. This time, the topic is divided into four main parts. The first one is the CNI application or the products. And the second one is our solutions about the different scenarios. The third one is the product features. And the last one is some cases reference. For Goodway, we are not just a product that we make, but more of a service and integrated platform. As you can see, we are not only have the star product inverter, but also related accessories and platforms are more complete. We are committed to providing users or customers with a full range of solutions, which is also our company's business philosophy. For example, in order to adapt the market demand, we will launch new inverters to adapt to high power modules or panels. Also, in order to interface with different third-party equipment, we will iterate new digital loader device and so on. Okay, the topology of industrial and commercial scenarios is a very typical use case. The inverter generates electricity and AC coverages, and then the load consumes or upload it to the grid. The data is uploaded to the cloud portal through the different communication devices for monitoring and management. Of course, in some areas such as the Philippines, where the low voltage access to the grid is required, the corresponding products are already in use. For large-scale industrial and commercial projects, not only do they need to be modified in terms of output voltage, but some communication methods also need to be added to them, such as support for the PLC communication. Here is a brief description of the specific Goodway solution in each section. Okay, for the communication part, we firstly use Wi-Fi and LAN dongle in the CNI projects. This kind of network is simple. Fast configuration is mainstream configuration in foreign products. We have updated the 2.0 version for more stable connection. All right, the 4G communication reduces the limitation of the equipment and the wires. Currently, it is more used in China and Australia, also some European countries. If needed in other regions, we will match the local operators or punish the corresponding region-specific modules or dongles. Okay. Also, between the inverter and the digital logger, the general use of RS485 communication, this communication logic is simple, relatively stable, and reduce data packet loss. Okay, as just mentioned, the PLC communication is also available for high voltage or large CNI projects. Okay, next two of the most important functions in practice is the power export limit and the load monitoring. Goodway has taken most of the current scenarios into account in this regard and has developed different solutions and supporting equipment. Without going into the detail here, we can see that we are very detailed and specific about the different scenarios. Okay, in case of the small, this page, in case of the small commercial and industrial machines, such as SDT models with low current draw, the GM3000, the meter, can also be used. In addition, in order to adapt to the different types of power grids in Southeast Asian countries, the GMK330 will be used later to replace the GM3000 to meet the compatibility. Okay, because some commercial and industrial projects often have the larger power devices or the parallel connections, use a meter that supports the high current detection when selecting the meter. So the GM3000C or the GM330 is for the large commercial and industrial model use. Okay. Also, it's worth mentioning that in some areas it is a delta grid that's used and there's no neutral line. The same can be done with GMK330 or the GM330. The dividing line between these two meters is a current value of the 200 amps. This meter is currently being used in projects in Philippines. For the large CNI projects, the multi-inverter power export limit solution can be used. The multiple inverters are connected in the series through the IS485 interface, and the IS485 of the inverter at the near end is connected to the SEC1000, which collects the value or the direction of the current at the parallel point through the current transformer, we call the CT. And when the CT detects that the parallel points sell the power to the grid in the reverse direction, it will send the command to the inverter, which makes the inverter's output power match with input so as to achieve the power limit function. It's also possible to implement the functionality in the form of EasyLogger Pro and the Mix, a solution that is more applicable for the other grid type. Okay. At the same time, for the high voltage power export limit, we will introduce two solutions according to the actual situation, which are either direct measurement on the high voltage side or the summation of the measurements on the low voltage side. Both solutions are currently being tested in some real projects in Asia, and in the future, some articles or some files can be found on our website. Okay, this is measurement of the low voltage side. Okay, meanwhile, for the monitoring, for the load monitoring with the meter and the night power supply function, it is also be able to be designed differently according to the user's need. Also use SEC1000 to monitor for the load consumption, the same as the power export limit. Okay, SCADA system used on some the utility project or some the large scale CNI projects. It is interfaced to the platform through some use the IC104 the protocol, and here is some Here is a brief list of the models and the corresponding solutions that support IEC 104 for our products. Okay, the rest are some special scenarios cases of our Goodway products. For example, users can choose to use other brands of the digital logger. Goodway can open the inverter Modbus protocol content to meet the communication establishment. The products that have been tested so far are the Solarlog or the Metro for the previous Southeast Asian projects. Okay, at the same time, the Goodway supports the direct or forwarding of the data to the third-party platforms. Finally, for some unstable areas of the power grid, with the use of the third-party controllers can be similar to the diesel generators and other equipment together with a PV system. To achieve grid switching, there is already interest in cooperating on such programs in Myanmar. So what should be the most essential features as an inverter? Goodway thinks it's safety and protection. Whether it's Goodway or any other brands, I think there's some measures or some methods that we are always improving and adding to in order to just generate the power safely. So the first one, AFCI, for example, the short time arc extinguishing. As you can see, our functional standards are all about the UL standards. But the functional certificate will be changed to the IEC 63027 standard for these series later on. Okay, to protect the maintenance and the fighters, SD feature can be added. And the SPD protection on the DC and AC side. And for some G3 models of the Goodway products, we have updated to the type 1 plus type 2. That means that we have the both type of protection of the SPD. Okay, of course, a reasonable heat dissipation system and the fan design to ensure the relatively good temperature rise and the full load. Also included is the fact that we test and maybe take some reports according to the design and the function test before the shipment, such as the ATS test and some agent test. And should guarantee or to promise for the users and our customers to the products can be used normally. And the all kinds of certificate for the such as the ISO 901. Okay. In some hot and humid environment, the negative or the modules will lose some electrons to the Earth, which will cause modules derating rapidly, especially in some the floating projects. While we believe that the process and the sealing of the panels can now be of the higher quantity, Goodway can still provide the second provision and the recovery method at the inverter end. Okay, and in conjunction with the use of aluminum cable in some areas, could we offer the copper and aluminum transition terminals to accommodate the port connection and reduce the fire risk? Okay. Above, you can see the Goodway's approach to the scenarios, application, and the equipment design aim to adapt to the user's needs as well as the market trends, which has led us to have so many the successful cases around the world. Okay, here is some just a brief display of a few cases photos for your reference. Okay, that's um, some bigger the cases in the China, also in the South Korea, and in the Vietnam we have established some the projects while using the HD series for the commercial project. Also for the India, uh, sorry, the India, the MT and the HD inverters are more popular for user. Malaysia. Also in some European countries, the commercial one will have the bigger scale for the factories or some the industrial the areas. And also in China, the Yunnan province, so the southwest of our country, and the weather or the temperature is similar with Southeast Asia. So we can uh, take our the projects normally and to push our the project across the world. All right. So thank you for watching my presentation. And I think Goodway has always been committed to providing more comprehensive solution for users. So I think please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful presentation. It was really great. So, I would like to make a small announcement for the attendees that you can post the questions in the Q&A box, and our speakers will answer those questions at the end of the panel discussion. So, don't forget to post your questions. And now, let's begin. So, embark on a transformative journey with Navigating Growth Southeast Asia CNI Market Update Recap and Analysis webinar. As we navigate the evolving landscape of the region, commercial and industrial solar market, this webinar serves as a gateway to comprehensive understanding of the latest trends in the Southeast Asia CNI solar sector. So, together, let's harness the potential of solar energy to shape a brighter, cleaner, and more sustainable future. To discuss this, we have some great experts from the industry, and I would like to introduce the elite panel for today. Mr. Binoy Prim, who is from Inerco Solar, is the moderator for today. Mr. James Baskowitz from Baskowitz Group, Mr. Gary Espino from Sky Renewables, Mr. Lorenzo Mancini from Total Energies, Mr. Oscar Loza from Bessis, and Mr. Jeffrey Zinn from Goodby. So, welcoming all the panelists on the screen, and I would like to hand it over to Mr. Binoy to take it over. Thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priyanshi, for the kind introduction and organizing this event. It's a pleasure for me to basically moderate this panel, which is very interesting. The solar CNI market in Southeast Asia is really burgeoning right now, and we have a very interesting panel, diverse panel today to discuss about various markets and various drivers for this market. I think maybe a good way to start will be for each panelist to introduce themselves and their company. So let's go by order of appearance. Mr. James Buskovitz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is James Buskowitz. I'm the founder and CEO of Buskowitz Energy. Buskowitz Energy is a rooftop solar developer and EPC currently based in the Philippines. We're looking at the broader Southeast Asia, but currently our focus is really Philippines.
Okay, thank you. Then Mr. Gary Espino from Sky Renewables.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Gary Espino. I'm head of the Philippine operation. We are focused on CNI rooftop solar, and we operate in 4 areas in Southeast Asia: Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, and in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Mr. Lorenzo Mancini from Total Energy.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Lorenzo. I'm Italian. I'm based in Singapore. I've been in Asia for 18 years now, and I'm in charge of sales for Asia Pacific for Total Energies Renewables DG, which is the CNI segment of Total Energies.
Thank you. And then Mr. Oscar Loza from Berkeley Energy, or BASIS, should I say?
Yeah, BCS. And so, hello everyone. And so I'm Oscar. I'm BCIS head of business development and marketing. And so we are a renewable energy company specialized in different types of solutions, including solar, but also biomass, cooling, compressed air. And we're based in China, Southeast Asia, including Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and India. Thanks.
Wow, that covers a lot of markets. So it's good because we're going to have an insight of many of these markets. So, and my name is Benoit Prime. I'm a French Australian. My background is in a utility scale project, and I started a rooftop solar company in Indonesia about 5 years ago. And we started as a rooftop solar installer, and now we're focusing on the development, financing, and construction of CNI projects. And we're starting to we're getting some project here in Indonesia. Proof that the market is going somewhere, and we can discuss about that at a later stage. Okay, so thank you everyone. So maybe let's start by giving a bit of an introduction of the Southeast Asian CNI market. So maybe James, would you like to start with the Philippines?
Yeah, sure. So how do we best start a topic like this? So the CNI market in Southeast Asia, I think, is very aggressive. But I think a lot of the regulations aren't quite there yet to really allow it to grow as aggressively as the demand currently is set. So I think the expectation for the Southeast Asia market, not just Philippines, of course, as well, is very aggressive. But there are a few things that slow down that growth. The regulation is one, but then there are, of course, other factors, and different markets have very different approaches to this. But obviously, from an overall market perspective, it starts with the utility, then it goes down to the CNI, and then eventually to the residential level. I feel the CNI market is currently very hot. Majority of our projects are almost 99% of our capacity is really CNI. And again, that varies from country to country, but yeah, it's a very interesting segment. PPA exists in this market. Leases exist in this market. EPC is viable in this market. And yeah, that's probably what I would say to that.
Okay, that's very good. I think if I may speak about Indonesia, we feel the same push, the same interest in renewable energy and rooftop solar, with same challenges in terms of regulation. But maybe let's look at other markets. Maybe Lorenzo, do you want to talk about Vietnam, which is a more mature market in terms of CNI?
Yeah, I think. Thanks for the question. Benoit, I think Vietnam is definitely one of the ones to watch. We are active across the region, so in all countries across Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, and so on. Indonesia, like you mentioned, is not really moving much. Vietnam is moving, even if it is not moving as fast as it was some years ago. There was two waves or two issuances of feed-in tariff, which boosted the market very much, actually a bit too much, in the sense that encouraged a lot of developers to enter the market and were actually abused in some extent from some developers because they were basically providing energy or oversubscribed versus what EVN, which is the grid company, was expecting. Since then, EVN has been more cautious, and the Ministry of Power, basically, of the Energy and Power, has issued the regulations which still limits the size of installed rooftop projects and also does not allow for export of excess power. This is obviously a limitation in the sense that it means that to do an installation on a rooftop in Vietnam, you need to consider what is the actual self-consumption on site because you can't export anything. And often you need to do some curtailment. But even within these requirements or these restrictions, there is a lot of happening. A lot of projects now are happening in the north of Vietnam, even if the insulation in the north of Vietnam is much lower than in the south. Because in the south, the grid is overburdened. Basically, the infrastructure struggles to cope with the amount of solar energy which already is connected and is being connected. This is not the case in the north. But in the north, there is a big difference in terms of insulation because, Vietnam is a long country, so there's 1,000 kilometers between north and south, and that changes a lot. But still, it is a very active market, and it's definitely, I think, one of still the ones which is still more showing a lot of activity in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, thank you, Lorenzo. I remember what you mentioned about some developer abusing about the generous feed-in tariff at some stage. I've seen some panels put on some kind of structure, and they were claiming to be CNI while there was actually no consumption on site. And I think that's the kind of thing that EVN and the Vietnamese government is trying to address these days.
Yes, exactly.
And there was also a rush to get some CNI project or rooftop solar connected by the end of December, I don't know, 2022, 2021. So there was something like 6 gigawatt connected in 1 month before the end of the feed-in tariff at that time. So I can totally understand what you mean. The good thing, I think, is that when there is the right regulatory drivers, there is definitely a demand for this kind of service or product, which is very encouraging, considering that the whole Southeast Asian region is mostly relying on coal, and there is a desire to basically diversify their energy source and also be more independent in terms of energy supply. So speaking of that, maybe Oscar, do you want to tell us about the Malaysian market?
Yeah, sure. So the Malaysian market, we see a lot of traction. I mean, in the CNI segment, we see, and so we have some regions in the country where the customers are not being served by the grid, but rather independent power producers and generators like renewable power. And so that complexifies a little bit the situation in those regions because it becomes it's a little bit like in Indonesia. And so sorry, I just hear some noise. Just check if I can. Is it better?
I think it's better. Yes.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, and so I was saying that we encounter similar situations like in Indonesia, where these private power producers, they feel like we are competition, basically, the developers, and so it creates some tension sometimes. Fortunately, most of the country is served by Tenaga, and so the national grid. But yeah, we see this type of situations. We see a lot of let's say momentum with open access, so virtual PPAs, and so there's a lot of movement over there. There might be some challenges, and so. As I mean, just to explain very quickly, and so the virtual PPAs in Malaysia function. I mean, is that a tripartite agreement between the developer, the corporate consumer, and Tenaga, and so in TNB, and so where the developer agrees like a fixed pricing with the corporate consumer over maybe 20 years, whatever it is. And the corporate consumer pays Tenaga normal rates. And so then Tenaga pays the developer on a monthly basis based on the what they call the SMP rate, so the single margin pricing. And then you have like a compensation. And so, for example, let's say the agreed price between the developer and the corporate consumer is, I don't know, whatever, 0.25. And the SMP is 0.26, and so you're gonna have to reimburse 0.1 ringgit on the kilowatt. And so this is the main principle. And so we see, as I said, we see a lot of traction, and so there might be some changes because of the excitement this is creating, and so. There's a lot of exporting being done to Singapore, and so yeah, this is creating a lot of disruption. But we see a lot of customers wanting to engage into this type of contracts, and so I would say that this is the let's say the type of contract that we are targeting in Malaysia. There might be some risks. And so, for example, the interconnection, and so sometimes it doesn't have the required capacity, and so it can be mitigated with a step-up transformer to inject at 132 kilowatts, if I remember correctly. But it's going to add some costs to the project, and so that has to be factored into the model. Yeah. So what else can I say? I mean, we work a lot in the island of Penang, and so as everyone knows, there's been a wave of subsidies since the last 30 years for companies in the semiconductor microelectronics sector, and so there's a lot of companies in this segment, and they consume a lot of electricity, so they need a lot of. I mean, they're very eager to introduce solar projects into their factories. And since it's so concentrated, and so it has, we've seen sometimes very high level visits from either from headquarters or from the governments where these companies are headquartered. And so I can think about not to name it, a minister of energy from Germany that came to visit some of the companies. And then they were a little bit surprised that the company in question, they didn't have solar panels. And so this company was thinking probably they have other priorities, but since this person came, and so it pushed all of a sudden the development of these projects. And so yeah, I mean, we like it very much, Penang, because it has a very large concentration of industrial customers. But I mean, of course, we are present in all the country, but we focus a lot on Penang, and we see that it's a very dynamic part of the country for CNI. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting and very good insight, Oscar. Thank you very much. Now let's move to maybe again the Philippines or Singapore. Gary, I don't know which market you feel more like comfortable discussing, because I know Sky has also some project in Singapore. What do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can obviously I can talk about the Philippines because I'm the one running the Philippine operation. Among the four markets we're in right now, we're a very young company. We're a 2-year-old company, and we're fortunate enough in the Philippines to say that we're the most active market compared to amongst the four regions at the moment. The CNI market in this country is fantastic growth, very attractive. We do have the enabling laws in place, uh, but the enabling laws, to a certain extent, are being modified by the government in order to make it more attractive to investors in the Philippines. So there were a number of changes back last year, 2023, particularly in the CNI market, and yeah, these are the regulatory jungle that we need to walk through when you're doing CNI in the Philippines. Uh, but at the end of the day, for the Philippines, we're very encouraged. Uh, I think that there's enough private customers for all of us investors, and even more that we can actually help set up their renewable energy requirements in their rooftop. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for us, but very exciting, very exciting.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. I'm going to talk a bit about Indonesia because that's where we are based. The situation in Indonesia is most of the country is served by the utility called the PLN. It's a state-owned enterprise, and they basically do give you the permission or not to connect your system. And there was a bit of a discrepancy lately between what the regulation was saying and what PLN was doing in the field. But this is going toward some harmonization and more. It's getting more not organized, but consistent between what the Ministry of Energy is recommending and what PLN is doing. For instance, basically there is a net metering scheme in which the exported generation has to be valued at 65% of the current tariff. But this created some kind of appetite by some developers, and PLN was a bit scared of the momentum this was getting, considering that actually Indonesia doesn't need extra energy. There is already an oversupply of electricity, so they're already paying for some electricity which is not always consumed, so they didn't want to buy on top of that electricity from rooftop solar that they don't need. So there was a bit of a limitation, arbitrary limitation on the capacity installable in Indonesia. However, the situation is evolving now. We are expecting a new regulation, hopefully this month. That's what we've seen in the press. But given that there are elections in the next months, it may not happen that early. But in the new regulation, there will be people. Consumer who install solar panels will be able to export. However, it's going to be valued at zero. So it means that basically you don't have to limit the export of the electricity if ever you generate more than you consume. But if that's the case, then it's not going to be valued. It's going to be free electricity for PLN. So good for them. But and actually, from a developer and installer perspective, it's actually less technical to allow exporting rather than limiting the export. And in the presentation that Mr. Jeffrey Zinn provided, GoodWe has some zero export or export management system, which is good, and that's what we need as well. But if we don't have to manage the export, it's even better. But so that gives you an update on the Indonesian market. So PLN is getting more open to the idea of solar. That's for the areas which are served by PLN. There are other areas which are served by private IPPs. In this situation, it's more a one-on-one discussion with the IPP, because they are keen for the customers to install solar, but they want to make sure that it's not going to be detrimental to their revenues either. So it's a one-on-one discussion. But long story short, the renewable energy from wind and solar in Indonesia represent about 0.5% of the total energy generation or consumption. So it means that there is a lot of room for growth, and that's what is very attractive in this market. It's not an easy market, but no market is really, especially when you come with a disruptive model. All the utilities or IPPs see solar as a disruption to their business model, because it's going to be a lack of revenue for them until they do it themselves, and then they realize they can generate some revenue through it. But that has been happening in different markets before, and they've always been solution. And basically, my view is that solar is unstoppable. It can be slowed down, yes, but it's unstoppable given the cost of the solar panels decreasing I think it's is at a historical low these days. Might be wrong, but I think it's one of the lowest I've seen, and it's basically making it one of the cheapest way to generate electricity, and it's helping companies reducing their CO2 emission, which is especially for multinational companies very important these days. They all have stakeholders, they all have ESG targets, and their shareholders are asking them to basically reduce their carbon intensity in their service or product. And having someone putting solar panels does help in that prospect. I'm going to take that opportunity to engage toward the next topic, is about the business models that are currently offered for rooftop solar and the CNI market. And James, I think you mentioned a few options just previously. You mentioned EPC, you mentioned PPAs, you mentioned loans. Do you want to elaborate on the various business models available these days?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for the Philippines, here what we typically see is a solar lease. That's one, a solar lease that reduces the upfront cost requirement of the consumer, and allows them to lease the system, whether it's pegged on production or fixed leases. I think both models exist. Then we see typically a PPA, which has different regulatory requirements, but exists as well. And it's your standard PPA that exists in other markets as well. And then of course there's an outright purchase or an EPC model, where the customer just chooses to own the system and acquires it upfront. That of course has the largest upfront investment cost, but can generate substantial savings for the consumer. I think in the last few years, we've seen the PPA model to be the PPA and the lease, or anything that just reduces the upfront cost requirement of the customer, to be the most popular. but we are seeing some shifts in that as well, where we see a lot of the C&I customers now, basically looking at, especially larger chains that have multiple sites. They start with one or two or three PPA projects, and then eventually shift to an outright purchase model, just testing the waters with the PPAs, and then looking to reap all of the benefits with an outright purchase project. But then, of course, there are some that don't have the capex flexibility and would rather have an opex budget for just because of budget requirements or budget constraints. Being an opex item makes it a lot simpler for other larger companies.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I do agree. The cash flow is always for companies a sensitive topic, and the beauty of the lease or the PPA models is that there is a little or even no cash flow. Capital expenditure required, so it's easier on the cash flow. And the OPEX model here, for instance, in Indonesia, I can see is getting popular because basically we tell companies, look, we can reduce your carbon emission and you don't have to spend any money for it. And you're going to save on your operating cost as well, because we're going to give you an electricity which is cheaper than what the utility is giving you. Oscar, you mentioned a virtual PPA in Malaysia previously, and you mentioned as well the principle, which is basically, if I understand well, a financial arrangement between the utility, between the developer and the customer. Have you seen other market than Malaysia adopting, or maybe Lorenzo or Oscar, because your companies have quite a large footprint in Southeast Asia? Have you seen other markets where these virtual PPAs are applied?
Can I? Okay, I will start. And so, yeah, definitely, we see another market that is very dynamic and more dynamic than Malaysia is India, definitely. And so, a lot of things going on in the virtual PPAs. This is what we call it. Sorry, again, this noise. Can you hear me? Is it better? Okay.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is originally where we call it open access. And so the challenge in India is the land, I would say, because of course, as everyone knows, I mean, it's nowadays I think it's the most populated country in the world, and not the biggest one. And so land is scarce, and so. It's not an easy task to find the land, and then all the permitting takes a lot of time. And so for example, we at the beginning we encountered some problems where we thought it was going to be very smooth, and then it turns out that you need a lot of not a lot, but it takes a certain amount of people to take care of all the permitting for the land, and so that can be a challenging in India. Another place where I haven't seen virtual PPAs, but I know that the regulation is there, but I haven't seen it. And my colleagues probably they know more than me in the Philippines. One thing that can be interesting in the Philippines that we're studying currently is that. Unlike India, there are some customers that have like important land extensions, and we have some customers that ask us. They say, "Okay, look, I have this land, and so is it possible? Maybe we, I either lend it to you, or we do something with it, and then we build up a virtual PPA, and so I will consume part of it, and then we sell it to somebody else." And so that is something that we've got some requests in the Philippines from some customers. We haven't done it yet, but it's just to give like some insights on the trends about this. And then Malaysia, I already talked about that. Yeah.
Very good. Lorenzo? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think exactly. Just continuing what Oscar was mentioning, I think the starting point is that okay, a rooftop. We build the rooftops, solar rooftops, let's say. It's a win-win. You know, like you mentioned before, the customer has decarbonized electricity at a price cheaper than the grid price, with zero capex because we do the investment. So it's perfect. The only limitation is the size of the roof, which means that basically we can't normally go beyond 15, maximum 20% of the consumption on site because of the physical constraint of the site. You know? So what we see with a lot of customers, we work mostly with big multinational companies, but it's typically always the same process. They start with the rooftop and then they say, okay, that's great. I'm doing something for my decarbonization process, but I need to do more. What can we do more? And we try to support them as a decarbonization partner, let's say. And that means that after the rooftop, we need to go on other instruments. Offsite PPA, so virtual PPA, open access, as it's called in India. There is a lot of different names, but that's the logical continuation. It's not possible in all countries because of regulation, because of the infrastructure connection, even if it's becoming more and more possible in more and more countries, let's say. It's complicated, like Oscar mentioned. You need the land, which is always complicated. You need permitting requirements and so on. But it's a logical, I think, evolution of what we do on site to some extent. You know? And I think that the governments, to some extent, are also recognizing this. Just to go back to Vietnam, for example, in Vietnam, the equivalent is the DPPA. It's called the DPP, the Direct Power Purchase Agreement project, you know, which is a pilot which was supposed to be launched 4 years ago, I think, then 3 years ago, then 2 years ago, then now they're saying they're going to launch it next year. It's something that the government is doing also because, I mean, it's being pushed by the big foreign investors. I mean, the big investors in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, they want renewable energy. And they are getting to the point that they are telling the governments or the ministries that if they don't get access to renewable energy, then they will consider of moving their investments elsewhere. So it's really a big geostrategic issue. It's just accepted that it clashes, like in Vietnam, for example, with infrastructure. The problem in infrastructure is not that the government or the MOIT don't want to do it. It's just that the physical infrastructure of EVN is not capable of accepting a large income of renewable energy and dispatching it somewhere else in the country. So they need to build up the infrastructure. But it's going to come, and it's going to come in all countries in Southeast Asia eventually.
Yes, I agree. I mean, from our perspective here in Indonesia, we also have this issue of the grid being sometimes the biggest constraint. And one of the constraints, and there is also in the new regulation, the upcoming regulation, to limit by area the amount of solar each area can take. So because of the grid limitation, they don't want to have like an industrial area, something like 5 gigawatts of solar. If there is a cloud coming and there is no power station nearby to complement due to the intermittency of the solar, this could create problem on the grid. So and we've seen that with there is what they call the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is some fund from private and government to enable the energy transition. There is no energy transition without strengthening of the grid, and everybody agrees on that. So when the grid will be stronger, there will be a higher penetration of CNI. That's very good. Gary, did you want to? Is there a different business model that you guys are exploring, like maybe in a more mature market, like I would say Singapore, or where it's more? I mean, I'm comparing that to Indonesia. I think, I would say Singapore is a more sophisticated market. Is it possible? Are there other business models possible?
Well, at least in my experience with the group, Singapore is a very sophisticated market and very, very difficult to penetrate. As a new player. But more than commenting on Singapore opportunities in the Philippines, I do agree with what everybody's saying about the land issues that you need to face with the grid issues which we have in the Philippines. We have that, so it's part of the problem also. A lot of my CNI customers, that's actually a common question by CNI customers. How can I buy more renewable energy from you guys? My rooftop is not going to be enough, and we're slowly looking into the virtual PPA concept. Now, anything about 1 megawatt in the Philippines, under an off-site arrangement, you're going to have to go get what you call an RES license. So this is an application process with a regulatory commission, submit a lot of the requirements and all that. So from, as a 2-year-old company, we're going through that process because at the end of the day, CNI is great, but we have ambitions to scale. And CNI is going to be limiting us if we're going to be focusing on just CNI. So we're looking at the offsite opportunities in the Philippines. But yeah, but going back to Singapore, we have closed a few deals, but it's a difficult market. Competition is really very high, very tough in Singapore, and I think we're one of the latecomers or the late players that joined the game in Singapore. Vietnam, as far as Vietnam is concerned, part of the concern is the regulatory environment, which is not clearly defined, as I understand from our people there. But we're making headway in moving the CNI opportunities in Vietnam. Malaysia, we have a few projects in Malaysia. We're also looking at the virtual PPA model in Malaysia. The only, all I can say is that once you go offsite versus the CNI, once you go offsite, you're gonna have to deal with a number of issues, and one of them is really the land issues, the permitting, and no question about it, the grid. We call them the NGCP here. So the grid issues. So location is important for offsite projects.
Okay, I hear it from what I hear from you, gentlemen. It looks like there is a demand, definitely a demand from the CNI users, from the customer, to get more solar and a bit of which is limited by the roof size. And when you start to go offsite, then you start to hit the typical problem of the utility scale project, which is securing the land, getting the permits, getting the grid connection, which basically requires some time, some cost as well, which for utility scale projects, can afford. But if it's for a small, like a 1, 2, or even a 3 megawatt project, these start to be less efficient, and it underpins the performance of the system, and basically impact the price as well of the PPA or the tariff you can offer to the customer. So that's interesting to see that it's happening across the region, and hopefully maybe that will be a topic in terms of the regulation, something that can be passed on to by the association of renewable energy in each country, to maybe simplify the process for small, if I may say, small utility scale project to get faster approval and faster permitting from the stakeholders, because that's something, I mean, in the utility scale side, that always has been one of the bottleneck of the projects. But moving on to the performance of the CNI project, James, is there anything you can share that will about a typical CNI project? Say how much cheaper compared to the electricity, the utility price can a customer expect in the Philippines, or what percentage of its consumption can he expect to offset with rooftop solar?
Sure. So this will, of course, be different in every region, and definitely from country to country even more. But essentially, we're looking at prices today that are less than half of grid prices.
Wow.
So that's for CNI customers, mainly because of scale. So with our projects, typically, this is not for all, but for essentially 4, 5, 6 megawatt projects, single rooftops, we're looking at almost 1/3, some even 1/4, but again,
Wow.
this is because the Philippines has very high electricity costs.
Yes.
This will probably not be applicable to other countries like Vietnam or Indonesia, where the prices are a bit cheaper. But for the Philippines, we are essentially a group of thousands of islands where distribution is expensive, and generation is expensive, because it's not like in other countries where you can. Well, I'm not sure about the other Southeast Asian counterparts, but in some countries you build one massive power plant in one area and you can distribute that to different all different various cities. Here we have that infrastructure is a bit more complicated to solve, and so generation rates are higher, distribution rates are higher, transmission is higher, and then we need submarine cables, and so that makes the cost of electricity very expensive in the Philippines. And so solar becomes all the more attractive for the CNI market, mainly because we're able to offer prices that are so cheap in comparison. And essentially, and I think that's also why what Gary was saying earlier, Philippines is one of the most active markets at the moment, just because it makes so much economic sense.
Yeah, fair enough. And yes, the Philippines is one of the, I think, second highest after Japan in the region in terms of electricity prices, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that makes obviously a lot of sense. If a customer can get his electricity price divided by 3, at least for a part of it, why not? And he doesn't have to spend any money up front. Why not? And to answer your question, I can talk about Indonesia. Here, the electricity price is subsidized, heavily subsidized at different level. 86% of the electricity is coming from fossil fuel, mostly coal, and you have the subsidies for the coal mining, the coal IPPs, but also at the PLN, at the utility level. So the electricity is, yes, cheap, but it's subsidized. So possibly in Vietnam must be the same. The other markets, I'm not sure, but just to mention that about Indonesia. Maybe Lorenzo or Oscar, again, you guys have quite a wide footprint in the market. Do we see in other markets some attractive discounts compared to utility tariffs? Maybe obviously not as much as the Philippines, but something that, I mean, usually if you offer 5%, people are not going to be super excited. But when you start to hit the 10, 20%, then what I'm noticing is start to trigger some interest. Do you see that happening across Southeast Asia in general, or is still lagging a bit?
Yeah, no, yes. I think I was going to ask James, because I mean the projects that we have done in the Philippines, I see one difference. Also, quite big projects is in the Philippines. There is no, let's say, standard government mandated rate. You know, and so it's different rates depending on the region, local rules, and so on. So it's difficult. I think at least we have found it difficult to let's say, define a benchmark grid reference. Definitely, the discounts are big, but very often the customer, at least in our experience, doesn't really want to disclose how much he's paying to the grid. No, so it's more a question of how much we are competing against our developers, let's say. While Vietnam, for instance, is a bit like Indonesia, so there is a government rate, even if it is on time per use. It's a bit different, but it's similar to Indonesia also in the sense that it's quite cheap, equivalent of 7 US cents. It's also subsidized. So you can give discounts, but not huge discounts. And again, they're very different from the north and the south. In the south, you can do maybe 25, 30% discount off the grid. In the north, no, 5, 10% is maximum. Okay. I think that's a bit the situation in Vietnam. Probably Singapore is different in the sense that Singapore electricity price is so high that, yes, you can promise half of the grid price. It's just a question that no one knows how long this very high grid price is going to last in Singapore.
Okay, yes. Oscar, do you have anything to add to the topic, or do you maybe you want to talk about the trends of the solar price lately? I mean, it's going down, so it helps giving better discounts to the customer. Do you see that going for a while, or do you see that having a plateau? Do you think it's going to increase again?
Venturing on the how the electricity price is going to move is quite a challenge, and so giving all the all the geopolitical situation that we are going through. And so, what I can say about that is that, yes, we applied different discounts in different countries, but I've seen now I can just, it comes into mind in Thailand, for example. So I'm based in Thailand. I cover the perimeter that I just described, but I'm based in Thailand. And so because it's easier for me to move. And in Thailand, we've hit like sometimes even 50-something% of discount compared to the utility grid. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible, and as you were saying, Benoit, now the panels are cheaper and cheaper, and so yeah, it's becoming I wouldn't say easy, but it's comfortable to propose good discounts to the customers. The one trend that we see that bothers us a little bit is that, for example, because we are investors, a lot of customers, mostly in Vietnam, asking for. They don't want the developer to propose an MCC, so a minimum consumption guarantee. A lot of my colleagues are accepting this, and so I have problems with that because we're not. Our shareholders, they don't allow us to undertake projects like this, and so I see that a lot of colleagues taking risks on this. Yeah, I would say that's a trend, a recent trend that I've seen. Yeah, I think the other ones. We discussed about the open access and this type of things. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for yes. I think the more competition, the more aggressive new entrants to the market are going to be, and they're going to be able to accept a risk or condition that other more established players wouldn't consider at first for good or bad reasons. But yes, I agree as well that there is some we can see some very aggressive offers as well in Indonesia. Now maybe let's talk about where do you think what is the next stage. I think my views is we talk about the expansion that has been limited by the roof area or the the administrative or permitting or land securing for CNI, or even being able to do a virtual PPA. I don't think that's even possible in Indonesia, for instance. But what about the battery storage, battery and energy storage? Do you think that's the next step in CNI, provided that obviously the battery storage keep on declining? James, do you have an opinion about this?
I mean, I think I hope so. I mean, I think storage will service very specific clientele. Many will not need it, mainly because most of the operational requirements or the highest energy demand will be during the day. Battery also means that you'll need excess. You'll have, essentially, it implies you need more roof space to generate excess power that you can store and use at a later date. So essentially, most of our CNI customers, they don't have enough roof space for us to even generate enough during the day to offset around half of their energy requirements. So if we're lucky, we generate maybe 30% of their daytime energy requirements. So in cases like those, energy storage is not very usable. Of course, there will be some customers that have the reverse, less daytime energy generation, especially plants that operate at night, for a more efficient, I don't know, because of temperature requirements, because of not sure which industries, but there are a couple that have a higher energy requirement at night. And for those, it could make sense. But whether the solar generation plus storage could already be cheaper than the grid remains to be seen, and I think that's something we're closely following. In the Philippines, it could work, but I don't think in the other Southeast Asian counterparts it could.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. If I can, no. Yeah. I mean, I agree with James. I think a lot of customers, or some customers at least, like very much the idea of integrating energy storage system, but the constraint is again the roof. They don't have enough space to generate even enough energy to cover the daily consumption, let alone to store it. A couple of projects that we've been looking at are interesting. If it was possible, which it isn't in most countries, to arbitrage on the grid electricity price. Vietnam, for example, there is a huge gap between the daytime grid price and the nighttime grid price. So energy storage system, if you could charge a battery during the night to discharge during the day, the peak time, the economics work, even now. The constraint is that from a regulatory perspective, in Vietnam, like in Thailand, you're not allowed to charge the battery during the night and discharge during the day for some obscure reason, because it doesn't make much sense to me. But from the developer point of view, from a business model point of view, the constraint is that this kind of business model is very much dependent on the current grid tariffs, because the moment that there is a change in the grid tariffs, it doesn't work any longer. No? And over a 5, 10, 12 years, 15 years lifetime of a battery energy storage system, it's not possible to be sure that there's not going to be any change in the grid tariff. Over the long term, it's expected that with the increase in renewable energy, in solar especially being generated, this will bring the daytime tariffs down. So the gap between the nighttime and the daytime will reduce, and at that point, the economic model doesn't work anymore. But it's interesting, I think. There is a lot of potential there, and it's really a question of finding the right way of, let's say, stacking, because in the end, for energy storage system to be effective, you need to stack different revenue streams. So basically, the battery needs to be able to help displace solar and then act as a energy storage, and then maybe also do, energy storage, a backup, UPS backup, do peak shaving, all of these. It's very complicated, though, because it's very country-specific, regulation-specific, project-specific. It's not as easy or not as plain vanilla as the normal rooftop projects that we do.
Yes, I agree. And it's also very customer-specific in the sense that for instance, I see in Indonesia, we have a peak time, a peak hour where you have the electricity, which is 50% higher than the rest, but it's from 5 to 10 p.m., for instance. So if there is no consumption in the customer at that time, there's no real point to provide energy at that time. But I'm being conscious of time, and I think it's the time now for the Q&A session. So Priyanshi, do you want to channel the questions?
Yes,
I don't know where to look at.
I'll just put the questions on the screen.
Okay. How important virtual power plants for renewable energy trading? Oh, that's a question for, I would say, sophisticated market, because renewable energy trading is not possible in Indonesia or Vietnam, as far as I know. Maybe in the Philippines or in Singapore. So maybe Gary, do you want to have a go at this question?
Sure. Yeah, the customers, my personal experience when talking to customers on offsite opportunities, number one attraction to them is the renewable energy certificate. In the Philippines, we do have RPS rules that will allow us to assign the energy certificates that we generate from our power plant to the customer. You just have to keep, I think, less than 3% for your company. So a majority of that you can assign it. And one of the key concerns of our private customers is our ability to make sure that we are able to assign the energy certificates to them. That said, we do not have a market where you can trade it here, but these companies are just, at the end of the day, accumulating. What we've noticed here in the Philippines, especially the multinationals, is that they are constantly accumulating these energy certificates from the power they buy from the different suppliers in the Philippines. So yes, there's a demand for that.
Okay. So moving ahead with the next question.
So what kind of PPA? PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement. I know we've used that acronym a lot during the session, and it should have been defined earlier, but yeah. What kind of Power Purchase Agreement will, sorry, I didn't see the rest of the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll just play it again.
Will be developed in Southeast Asia, like direct PPA or virtual PPA. So yeah, that I think we obviously some people know more than I do. But what I've heard from the panel today is it's happening in Malaysia. It's the direct for the virtual PPA. It's happening in India. It's supposed to happen in Vietnam. It's been supposing to happen for a while. But again, a question for either Oscar or Lorenzo. What are your views? Because you have more global view on the Southeast Asia market.
If I can start, maybe. I think that a lot of countries, or actually probably all countries in Southeast Asia, want to go this way, want to enable virtual PPAs, offsite PPAs, DPPAs, call it what you want, it's always the same thing, okay? Because a lot of companies want renewable energy, and like we mentioned before, the rooftop generation is not enough, okay? The problem, in order to do so, they need to unpack the structure of the electricity market, typically, in the sense that the VPPAs or the offsite PPAs work in those markets which are deregulated, where the transmission and distribution is controlled by one entity and the power generating entities are separate, are no longer government owned, typically. Because at that point, basically, the generation facility, solar, is on par with other generation facilities, and they all leverage or utilize the same distribution network. And the electricity price every half hour is settled on a market basis, and that's what is the underlying price that the contract for difference, because in the end, the virtual PPA is a contract for difference, strike price is driven on. Okay, this as is easy to understand is very complicated process to go through and very cumbersome and takes a long time. It needs, first of all, strengthening the infrastructure, and then it needs basically all the laws and regulations which are required to unpack the electricity market. To give you an idea, in Vietnam, for example, which has been trying to do this for the DPPA for some time, this would involve that all the generation facilities which at the moment are operational and are government owned would be privatized. Now no one knows what is the cost of generating electricity in Vietnam on a coal basis or gas basis, because it's government owned. It all finishes in the same cauldron, and in the end it's the government who basically compensates any deficit that there is. It means that all these government-owned generation facilities would have to be privatized and on the market competing against one another, so it would have to become efficient to be able to survive on the market. It's a very long and complicated process. It's not something that can be decided overnight with a change in regulation.
Okay, thank you. Oscar, do you want to add something?
No, I think I think Lorenzo did. He said everything. I think the virtual PPAs, open access, whatever we want to call them, is the natural next step for companies that want to increase their renewable energy penetration, because of what you said. They cannot just put everything in the roof or ground mounted. They just don't have the enough space, and so that's the only solution. And so, of course, some let's say in some countries a little bit more. The regulation is still not there, and then even if it's there, it's complicated. But I think I don't know if it's you, Benoit, who said that, but this is part of this is progress, and nobody stops progress. And so even those who want to who oppose it, they end up by accepting it and embracing it. So yeah, I think it's the natural evolution of GNI.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Bianchi, is there any additional question?
So we'll take one more question. After that, we can wrap up the session since time is not allowing us. So this is the last question I'm displaying on screen.
So how do you face from FIT to reverse auction for RTS? So FIT is feed-in tariff, RTS is rooftop solar. So how do you face from feed-in tariff to reverse auction for rooftop solar? So I guess in my views, that's a lot of to do with the regulatory, and it's a mechanism that needs to be put in place by the government. The feed-in tariff is the easy it was an easy way to develop the rooftop solar industry, in the sense that you generate and the government pays for it. Then there was the next step was more like the net metering, where you self-consume in the first place, and then you can export and sometimes get revenue for that or not. The reverse auction is a more sophisticated system. It's happening in other markets. I would say in India, pretty much, and for utility scale projects in Indonesia with Indonesia 2023. I think that's the same system. It's basically a tender where the lowest bidder win. But again, maybe someone has a clear answer to this question, especially people who are familiar with the Vietnamese markets, maybe?
No, yeah. If I can step, it's like you said, specifically for Vietnam, the regulation, when the feed-in tariff was in place, the feed-in tariff was reserved for rooftop, but also for ground mounted to some extent, but with different tariffs. Okay, that's what also brought some abuses, because people were building ground mounted on stilts, basically on supports which were 2 meters high, and saying this is rooftop, and they would pay a higher tariff. While at the same time, the utility scale projects were being awarded and paid based on a reverse auction. Okay, so there were both schemes available in Vietnam, and the difference was the size. The fact that basically the feed-in tariff was paying so much more than the reverse auction was one of the reasons that basically a lot of projects migrated from one to the other.
Okay, so that's explained why the feed-in tariff was quite generous at that time. Well, now it looks quite generous, but at the time the price of the solar panels and wind turbine was lower as well. But it did kickstart the industry in a very successful manner as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you so much, all our esteemed panelists, for this wonderful session, and thank you, audience, for joining the webinar. And a very special thanks to Mr. Binoy for superbly managing the session, and a big shout out to our attendees for extending their immense time and valuable support to the event. Special thanks to our sponsor, Goodwe, for their support to organize this webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. We promise to come back soon with more exciting topics. So, till then, bye from our end and take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Thank you.